My name is Amy. I am 33 years old and I live in New Jersey in the United States. And I am living with bipolar.
For how long now?
I was diagnosed when I was 16, so almost half my life.
You were young.
Yeah. Yeah, I was not, I mean, like I've read the bipolar subreddit. I'm obviously not like the youngest person who's ever been diagnosed, but pretty young. It really did come about very quickly, or at least the diagnosis seemed to be coming about very quickly.
Did you have an episode? How did you get diagnosed?
So I had a mental breakdown when I was like 15, 16, and it happened at school. It was a huge mess. I disclosed that I was feeling suicidal at that time. So they put me in the hospital, and from there it was just like, well, we think you're depressed, so we're going to give you antidepressants. And that just, I mean, getting antidepressants as a bipolar person, that really messed me up.
They did that
Like,
to me as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like I mean, I know that it's like the first line of defense if somebody is like, I'm feeling depressed, I'm not doing well, I'm suicidal, like if you're down like that, I understand that the first line of defense is to give someone antidepressants. But when you also have the same person being like, I feel really happy and this is really great. I hear voices, by the way. Like that's normal, right? And everybody is just like, you're probably faking it. Like you're probably faking that part of it. You're just depressed. So here's some antidepressants. And I mean, that just sent me into a crazy manic phase. And that was when, after I was put into the hospital again and again after that, they just finally were like, hey, we think that you're not depressed. We think that you probably have bipolar. Um, they also said it could be called manic depressive at that time too, which is like, wow, that's way back in the day.
I mean, it's odd. So you say you're hearing voices and they kind of like ignored it? Or they
They
didn't think it
did.
was a big deal?
Yeah,
That's a
they,
huge schizophrenic, like,
right?
psychotic, basically psychosis. Yeah, it's a huge indicator of psychosis. But they
Yeah,
ignored it. Yeah.
they ignored it. Everybody was just like, I mean, after, so I have several suicide attempts under my belt, unfortunately. But after a few of those, everybody was like, "Oh, are you just doing this for attention?" And then, are you saying that you're hearing voices? Is that just for attention? And it's just like, e- eventually, I, I learned to just live with it. Like it was one of those things that it never went away for the longest time. And I was just like, I guess everybody hears voices because like nobody seems to think it's that big of a deal.
Do you feel like you were getting to the wrong doctors or something? Like, why?
Yeah. I absolutely had the wrong doctors for a while. I finally had one doctor who was like, let's try and treat the voices. And so they put me on a medication that I guess like is specifically for voices, but it just kind of made everything worse. And I was like, okay, this is not great either. And they kept being like, oh, no, we're going to help you with this. Let's pile on the medication. Let's up the dosage of it, and we're going to see if that helps. And it just landed me back in the hospital. Like it was a mess. I did not find a doctor who really took me seriously about it until I was 27.
20, so 11 years after what you believe was your first episode,
Yeah.
a depressive type
Yes.
episode, and you have psychotic symptoms,
Yeah.
hearing voices,
Yeah.
and it was 11 years to find the good doctor.
Yeah. Yeah. I got used to it. I mean, I know that sound like how could you get used to um hearing voices? I know that probably sounds really weird to a lot of people because, that's not a normal thing, but I just got used to it. It was like background noise after a while. I just learned to like tune them out. Um,
Was he giving you commands?
Sometimes there were always like I always felt that there was only like two voices at a time, and I would hear them like whispering to each other behind me. Kind of reminded me of, um, how if you're standing in line for a movie and you're standing in line for movie tickets and there's a couple behind you and they're kind of talking to each other. They're not talking to anybody else. So their voices are kind of low. You can't really make out everything that they're saying, but you know that they're talking behind you. It was kind of like that. Everybody seemed to think they're like, oh, the voices must be in your head. And I was like, yeah, I guess they're in my head, but they sound like they're coming from behind me.
Yeah, I've had uh, uh, audio voice hallucinations. And yeah, I know what you mean. They're in a specific place.
They are. Yeah. It was weird. Like I just anytime I brought it up to anyone, they were all just like, I mean, anytime I brought it, I didn't bring it up to anybody. Um, I mean, how could I? Eventually I stopped even bringing it up to like my therapist at the time. I've had different therapists over the years, and I stopped bringing it up to them because they were just like, "Oh, are you schizophrenic? Are you going to do this?" And I'm like, "I don't know what I am right now, but I don't think I'm gonna hurt anybody because of this." Like they never told me to hurt anyone.
That sounds good. Yeah. Because so basically, it wasn't a hypnotic experience. Like the voices weren't. Because my experience was initially a little bit hypnotic, and I think my doctors got concerned about it because I was like, it was just for a day actually. Because my reaction to anything like this is I raise my medication, and that's what I did, and it worked. But the first day was like I struggled with not doing what the voice was telling me. But it sounds like in your experience, you just had company, kind of. Like you didn't seem like you had a lot of, hey, do this, hey, do that all the time.
I definitely had the hey do this, hey do that in the beginning. And it was always, do something bad to yourself. And I did listen at that time because they were so loud and they were so forceful. Um, like I couldn't do anything but listen to them. And I mean, and they told me to do crazy things. I mean, like I know, especially on the Reddit, that people like to post, they're like, hey, what's your craziest manic story? What did you what did you do that was like the craziest thing? And everybody's on there and they're like, I bought a boat or I did this. And I don't tend to put my story up in there, but I think the craziest thing I've ever done was I bought a ticket to Finland to meet a guy I had met online. And then I flew to Finland. I think I know, like that's the the craziest thing I've ever done, and that's because the voices were like, "Hey, you should do this. This seems like a good idea."
Was it a good idea in the end?
Um, I actually had a really good trip. Um, I got there and I realized, hey, I don't actually want anything to really do with the person that I flew out there to meet. So I just decided, hey, you're in a totally different country and you might as well just have a good time while you're here because, you don't get to do a lot of traveling. So it's one of those, I got my first tattoo in Finland. Like, it was actually a pretty good experience all around. Yeah. Oh, I was just gonna say, I mean, I came back and everybody was like, I think you're in a manic episode. You need to go to the hospital. And I was just like, yeah, probably.
At that point, you couldn't quite tell if you were in a manic episode? And can you tell now? Or is it like, because I know there's, like, I can tell, but I've been to a support group and I could tell that other people, it was more subtle somehow and they struggled with, like, my manic episodes are so immediately intense. And I have like physical sensations. Like I lose the sensation at the tips of my fingers, which is, I think it's because I'm texting a lot, but it's some relationship. But yeah, after a while, if I feel the tips of my fingers and I go like, oh, I can't feel them anymore. Somehow I know I'm in a manic episode. And then I feel like there's air going through my head. Like my head feels like very light. But I know that other people don't have those sensations. Is that your case? Did you learn how to figure this out or?
So I did learn how to figure some of it out. I find that if I'm going into more of like a manic, I guess a manic state, um, I feel like it's so weird that it's actually really interesting that you describe the physical sensations because I've always tried to describe the physical sensations and everybody is just like, that's just weird. Uh, but I always feel like I'm wearing like a baseball cap, except I'm not wearing the cap part. It's just like the brim and it feels like it limits my vision almost. Like I feel like I just have the brim and I have to see like I'm making I'm making a goggle type thing, but it's not quite that either. But yeah, it feels almost like wearing a baseball cap. And that I can't see as well as I used to be able to see. Even though like I can, obviously I could look up and still see everything, but it was just that sensation. And I've learned to know that that is, hey, you're kind of becoming you're a little manic. Or at least you're kind of heading up that ladder.
But what you mean is like your mental vision. Yeah, like your ability to predict the future and act accordingly is being like
Yes.
turning into a tunnel of like you have to keep going, kind of like a tunnel vision type sensation, but
Yes,
mental. Is that what you mean?
exactly. Yes, that's exactly. You're the first person who has ever been like, I know exactly what you're talking about. Oh my gosh. That is that is crazy.
It's just so different, which is why I wanted to do this, right? Because I'm sure that I'll probably talk to somebody maybe in a year and they're gonna go like, you know what it feels like? It feels like I have a brim of a baseball cap. I go like, that's exactly like Amy. That's
Yeah.
100% the same. And he goes like, oh, that's amazing. That episode 4, I have to listen to it. You know,
Yeah.
because yeah, it's just it's wild and uh, you just learn so much by listening to other people with this condition. I think.
Yeah. That's like and that's just so interesting. I mean like you learn so much and I mean like I'm more of a lurker on Reddit and I know I keep bringing it up but it's like really the only place that I've found that has like kind of a safe space for people with bipolar. Um, and that just like it's been really interesting because it's opened my eyes to a lot of things because I don't know about you, but when I was going through everything, I was like, everybody who has bipolar must be going through the same thing. Like this must be just what people with bipolar go through. Like this must be it. And then reading all the stories and learning from different people and I was just like, wow, this disease is very vast. It's there's just oceans between different experiences with some stuff. Like it's crazy. I'm saying it's crazy. I don't mean that we're crazy because we are definitely not crazy and our experiences are not crazy, but it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, I mean, so just walk me through a little bit. So this path to stability, right? You go in, you have the depressive episode, you have auditory hallucinations, which sound like voices. They're around you, and you struggle a little bit with them. They unfortunately gave you like self-harm type instructions for a long time, but after a while, you're just so used to it that they're not in control anymore. But nobody actually takes care of it. And so, like, okay, so roughly what happened there, and then what happened with the this good doctor that shows up and really just fixes it. Like, how does he fix it? Is it antipsychotics? Is it different kinds of therapy? Or
Um, so so I had when it comes to my bipolar, I was more I mean, I had my manic episodes, but I was baseline probably more depressed than anything. So that's why the manic episodes were just like so intense because otherwise I was like, I'm just depressed and I want to kill myself like all the time. It was bad. Like I was not medicated well. I was not stable. I was in and out of hospitals for most of my 20s. Um, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff that I don't know how to do that most people in their 20s learn how to do, but I was in and out of hospital so much, I never had a chance to learn these things. Um, so what happened though is I was 27. I was in the hospital again for another suicide attempt. Um, and this doctor was just like, you've tried so many different medications. You've tried different behavioral therapies like DBT and all those kind of things. And nothing has really helped you up until now. And the way that you're going is you will probably kill yourself, probably within the year, if you are not treated well for this disease. And so at that point, I was just like, let's do whatever we got to do because, there's still that part of me that doesn't want to die. There's always that part of you that does want to live. Um, so they recommended electroshock therapy, which they call ECT. Now it's called electroconvulsive therapy. And I did it. I had 13 sessions of it with it was a specific hospital here in New Jersey that I went to have this done at. And I did some of it inpatient and then some of it outpatient. And it's not, I want to kind of dispel the notion that it's anything like what you see in like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest kind of thing. It's nothing like that. Let's just get that out of the way because I also thought that that's what it was like. And I was like, that sounds barbaric. I don't know if I want to do that. Um, but the doctors, they had a pamphlet with pictures. Like, I mean, the pictures were little cartoons. So I don't know if they were trying to make it like family friendly or kid friendly or what, but I looked at the pamphlet, I asked all the questions that needed to be asked for my personal uh, what's the word? The personal, just to be more confident in my decision because it's a really big decision to make, and especially when you are very unstable and you don't know what else to do, and you're kind of like being told it's either this or pretty much nothing. I I did all the therapies. I'd been in therapy since I was 15. There was never uh, even when I was manic and didn't believe that I had bipolar and that I didn't need to be treated or anything, I still went to my therapist because I always just am like, therapy does work. I mean, it helps. It helps with other things. Just maybe if it didn't help with the being unstable part, at least it was helping with other things. But that wasn't helping. And I have been on so many different medications. And it's just, eventually you're taking like 15 different pills and you can't, I mean, like I had to have a list of medications on my phone because I didn't know any of what I was taking off the top of my head. People would be like, "What are you taking?" I'm like, "I don't know, but here's a list." Here's a here's a list of medications. I know the biggest one I was on for the most time was Seroquel. I don't know if you've ever been on that one. That's I mean it helped a little bit, but it also caused me to gain like so much weight. And my health just kind of tanked after taking that. And I was taking that was like one of the first medications they tried me on. And so they kept adding and taking away from like doing that to other medications while always keeping the Seroquel because they were like, oh, that's like the base medication, and we're just going to build off of that.
Yeah, I use Circle. I mean, it's actually my favorite. It works well for me.
I was on it, and it definitely worked for a little bit for myself. I just know that my brain chemistry changes very quickly. And so I adapt to medications faster than other people do. And so like my tolerance for things just like I used to have to take a medication to help me sleep. I would take melatonin, right? And I still take it, but I started to have I was taking like 50 milligrams a night at one point. That's a lot. It's too much. That's too much melatonin. Yeah, that's too much. But so I always had that problem. I would just adapt to the medications too quickly, and they would just be like, "Well, let's just go with a higher dose." And um, so that's why I had to get off of Seroquel, but it did work for quite a while. It is a good medication. Like I do recommend it to people.
So basically, ECT, just to clarify, the ECT worked.
It worked.
Like you were like, oh my god, like I did the cuckoo's nest lobotomy thing. Like
Yes,
they basically they show it as like a lobotomy. That's what they
they
do in movies.
do.
You look at people like A Beautiful Mind also has a scene of it, right, where Nash, I think that's the guy's character's name, which is a real mathematician. He gets the he doesn't get the lobotomy. He gets the shocks, and it looks like he's being basically lobotomized. Like he's basically a zombie after it. He doesn't have any libido, and his math isn't as good. He's basically half dead, and that's like again, which is funny because that's also what, to be fair, popular culture does with our condition. Bipolar people in popular culture are basically insane. Like there are no like you and me, like actually most people that I know, which is part of why I did the podcast, are stable. They're taking their meds, they're going to the support group, they go to their therapists, and most people are stable, but you tune in, you know, Netflix, whatever drama, and the bipolar person is the one that's the killer because he's
Yep,
crazy or she's crazy, you
because
know.
they're crazy or they have an issue with relationships because they're crazy and everybody is like, "Oh, we can't go near this person." Like these are all on shows. I hate that. I absolutely hate that because it shows us as people who can't control themselves. And most people who have bipolar, you're right. I've noticed that most of them they do take their meds. They are stable. They have jobs and careers and they're able to do all these things. And um it's such a shame that it's so stigmatized in society. I mean, I know that all mental health is really stigmatized. We're getting a little bit better with it, but it's still not great. Um, but specifically bipolar, I mean, just just people who come in and are just kind of like, why are they acting so bipolar today? Like, I hate that. I hate that.
One of my best friends, she came to me one day and she said, "Oh, you know, like this other girl, you know, she lies a lot and blah blah blah, and she's deceiving and manipulative. She must be bipolar." And I looked at her, I was like, I hadn't told her that I had bipolar yet. And I looked at her, I was like, what? What are you talking about? And she was like, well, you know, bipolar people is like two-faced. They have two polarities, you know, so they say one thing and they say the other thing. I was like, oh God, you know, obviously I explained it to her, but like, you know, just that there's no, which is bizarre because I think the prevalence of the disease is like 1 to 2% of the population has it on some level. And oftentimes when you do open up, I don't know if you had this experience, everybody goes like, "Oh yeah, my uncle has it," or "My mother's best friend has it." There's always like one case, but the way I say it is like, I think we're all in the closet. All the bipolar people in the closet, so you don't know that many successful bipolar people, even though in an average company that's 100 people, there must be at least 2 people there. But they don't come out and talk about it, you know, at lunch or whatever. And it's not the ideal situation.
It's not, and you really can't. Like you just I could never, if I went to a job, like if I went to my previous job or my current job and I just sat in the lunchroom and was just like, hey, so how's everybody's mental health doing? Like whatever the conversation starter would be to then bring up like, dealing with bipolar is just, it's tiring, guys. It's just so tiring. I'm tired every day from dealing with it. Um, you would be reported to HR. You would be, people would look at you differently. Um, at my last job, I had to disclose that I had bipolar, because I had an episode. I had an issue with my medication. It, it was, it was just this one episode after being stable for like 5 years and doing really well. And then just the slight medication changes it all. And, something happened. I had to disclose. And after that, it was just, I could tell that my supervisor maybe didn't trust me as much. I think that my coworkers were worried that something would happen. You know, a lot of, there were a lot of problems with that. And there are a lot of problems with that. It's just that stuff is that's really tough. And I recently got a new job, and there's a part of me that is worried about, disclosing that, I guess. Not that I feel like I have to. It's never a question of, oh, you have to disclose. It's nothing like that. It's just I don't want people to treat me differently. I want to be treated like a regular person. I know we're not supposed to use the term, and my therapist would be very disappointed in me for using the term, but I'd like to be seen as normal. And I know that there's no normal, like, but sometimes I just want to be normal. I want to be Amy. I don't want to be, oh, there's Amy the crazy girl. Watch out for her. Like I don't want that.
Yeah. Well, that's why we're here, I guess.
Yeah, that's why we're here. It's why we're trying to make it more normal. That people are just, like, hey, yeah, this person does have bipolar, but, you know, they're also a really cool video gamer. Like, you know, like I want it to not be that big of a deal.
That is the point. It's like people make it a big deal. Like often yourself, after if you've been stable for like a year or two, you start going like, "Hey, this is gonna work." You know, like I had a really big shock with my diagnosis. I really thought like, "Oh, my life is over. Like this is the end." And then I stabilized eventually, and I was like, "Oh, wait, like I can do all the stuff that I used to do. I can do it maybe even better." I'm pretty much fine, like 98% of the time. And then when you tell other people, they're horrified and shocked and astonished, and they think again you're a serial killer in the making. And you go like, why? What? Like, and it's all just misconceptions. The ECT. I was so excited when you told me about that because I was like, what? Because I thought that was like lobotomy again,
Yeah.
the popular culture aspect of it. Because my father actually, when I got diagnosed, my father took me aside. He said, "You know, I have a friend of a friend, and he struggled for many years. But then he went to this place where they shock him in the head every 6 months or so, and he's fine now." And I looked at my father, I was like, "You're just a horrible person. Like, why are you saying this to me? Like, I don't want to get shocked in the head." And then when you told me like it works, I was like, wait, so was I just again just like the people who look at us from the outside and go like, no, that's crazy. I was looking at a perfectly viable treatment option and going like, no, 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 that's insane. What are you talking about? Shocking people? And then you say like, no, but it works. I was like, it works? Nobody ever told me that it worked. Everybody told me it was just like a halfway house to, again, removing your brain. It's like,
Yeah.
but how does it work? Just to finish on that topic, is it like every 6 months? Do you have to do regular sessions as well? Is that like the way that things are usually structured?
So you can if you need it. They would be like checkup treatments, where you could have like one or two done every few months that would help kind of like continue continue the treatment, I guess. I have found that I haven't needed that just yet. I'm doing pretty well with it. I had my treatments. They they've worked. I don't hear voices anymore. Um, yeah, thumbs up on that one. I mean, they were gone after like the second treatment, and I was like, why is it so quiet here? Um, yeah, yeah, they do occasionally want you to do maintenance, but I haven't had to do maintenance treatments. But the option is still there if I ever do need to do that. Um, because I do live close enough to the hospital still, so I could go to the same place that I went to before, and I could probably do them as outpatient. But I really haven't felt the need to. I've just I've been so stable. I've been doing really well, like really well. Like my baseline of depression, I used to be right at the bottom, used to be absolutely horrible, and now I can confidently be like, well, I'm a little sad today. Maybe I'm not like depressed, but I'm a little down today. And instead, usually in the past I'd be like, oh, I'm down. Well, I am now really down. But yeah, I do want to say with the ECT though, is that it's very medically done. They're not holding these giant like earmuff things to your head and shocking you with something rubber in your mouth, and you're not awake during it at all. Yeah, like I'm not, they knock you out. They put you under anesthesia. You have no idea what's happening. And you're out for maybe like 5 to 10 minutes, and then you wake up and it did feel like I was hit by a truck the first few times. Like my body hurts because you are having a seizure. Like they're forcing your body to have a seizure. It's medically controlled, but that is what happens when the electricity goes through your brain, is your whole body starts shaking and jerking, and it hurts. It does hurt after the first two times. Like my body was just not prepared for that. Um, but after the first few times, it was like nothing. And you would just go to sleep for a little bit, and I would wake up and I would feel better. I would feel more like myself. I think that's the thing. ECT gave me back myself.
So I guess just let's talk a little bit about like you're in New Jersey. I mean, the U.S. is so big, so I'm gonna ask because I'm sure there's a lot of there's gonna be a lot of Americans, but the U.S. is so big that I go like, well, what is it like? You think there, the conditions of like you've already expressed a little bit that like at work it was not cool when you had to share it. There was a lot of issues. So is it the case that people don't regular people mostly don't understand this condition and they're mostly like what about mental health as well, like what is the awareness on those things as far as the societal level, you think?
So, I think that in comparison to when I was first diagnosed, I think that the attitude toward mental health in general in this country has definitely changed. Um, I would say it's even, I mean, look, it's still no picnic here for anyone who has any kind of mental health issue. Um, but like, it's definitely a lot better than it used to be. Um, it's a little bit, people talk more openly now about going to therapy or taking medication, but it's usually people who are saying, well, I take the medication for depression. I take medication for anxiety. And like everybody understands those two. Everybody does. They're like, okay, you take medication for depression. Everybody's depressed a little bit. Oh, anxiety. Everybody has anxiety these days. That makes sense. But then you say, oh, well, I take an antipsychotic, and people are like, whoa, 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 whoa. This is not good. Like, that's
Yeah, they start getting up from the table and going like, I forgot I had an appointment,
right.
and then just
It's like,
slowly move away.
well, I have to hit the old dusty trail now and get out of here, get away from you, just in case you snap. That's Everybody assumes you're about to snap. And it's just like, that's not how that works. First of all, like, at least for me, I'm not going to suddenly turn on you on a dime. Like, it's not going to snap my fingers and I'm suddenly a fully different person. Like, I'm still going to be me. Just, yes, I do have bipolar. And yes, I take an antipsychotic for that, but that doesn't make me psychotic. That's something I wish that the names were changed. Why do we have to call a medicine an antipsychotic? Like, why can't we change that?
Society doesn't understand that antipsychotics actually are really good. They actually work. If someone says I'm taking antipsychotic, what they're saying is I am fully or almost fully, depending on the person, but mostly it means I'm in control and I'm taking medication for it because I have a brain imbalance. I mean, this is a good question. Do you have any other memorable moments that you went like either positive or negative? Sometimes the positive ones are really fun. Like you said, the Finland story. Like sometimes the voices tell you to do stuff, and you're like, this is a great idea. And you go like, this is awesome.
There were definitely times. I think that I must have been a little manic to be able to get my first few tattoos. Just because like, not that I'm scared of needles or anything like that. And I always wanted to get tattoos, but I was always just like super nervous about it. I'm like, oh my God, it's gonna hurt. What's gonna happen here? And then like, it was kind of manic, and I'm like, sounds like, stick me with a bunch of needles. Sounds perfect. I'm so excited. This is gonna be great. Yes, I don't really know what I want as the tattoo, so we're gonna scribble something out real quick and I just yeah, so times that I got my tattoos were usually then, usually a little manic during those times.
Then you're still
I
happy with them.
Oh, I'm definitely happy with them. Yeah, that's the thing. Like, yeah, having mania, there are some good things. Like, I find that the more manic I am, the more confident I am. Like, I don't, usually I have this inward, you got that inward voice that's like, no, don't do that. That might not be good. You might have a bad outcome, so you might should just like take a step back. And then instead that voice is being told like, nah, shut up. Like shut up. We're good. We're good. We're gonna go do the thing. No, no issue. No problem.
You already sort of talked about it a little bit, but did you ever have like really outside of this one time at work? Do you find that this what were some of the strongest reactions you've had from people? Did you ever had like a person who just really either really negative or really positive?
Yeah. Um, so I've gone on dates where, after a few dates, it's like, well, I want to disclose this about myself because it's something that people need to be told because, they're just, I use it to like weed out the people who are going to have a problem with it. And if I bring it up a little sooner than most, like, I mean, people are like, oh, you should wait until like you've been with them like for a month or something and then bring it up. And I'm like, no, that sounds like terrible advice. I think I'm not going to bring it up the first date, but I'm definitely going to bring it up before a month has gone by. Um, but I had gone on dates before that, we had a great time for the first few dates, get to the next one. And this one guy, like I told him, I was like, hey, just want to let you know about something. Since we're talking about, I'm not like bringing it up randomly, but since we're talking about like medical issues or something, or, maybe someone was in the hospital recently, like, hey, what's going on there? This one guy, like I told him, he was like, yeah, I can't deal with that. And he got up and left. And I was like,
Whoa,
all right then. Like, good to know. Gotcha. Yeah. It was in the middle of the date, was stood up, was like, that's too much for me. I'm out. It's like, all right then. I mean, I know we hadn't gone on too many dates, but like still. But that's what you kind of have to do. My partner right now, I let him know that I had bipolar and that, it's a worry of mine. That I was basically, it's a worry of mine that you might be very worried and that you might not, like, you don't really have reason to be worried that much. And he said that, it does worry him, but not not to the extent that he sees me any differently. Like I'm still the same person. And that was, God, that just I couldn't believe it. I really couldn't. Anybody I've told about having bipolar, and if I was like trying to be in a relationship with them, that always ended up being like a deal breaker. And first person it wasn't for. So I was like, yeah, I got one. Yeah.
So there's one question that I'm really curious about, which is, so you did have psychotic like symptoms, but did you ever feel at some point that the experience was almost mystical at any point?
I would say yes. I would definitely say there were parts that felt mystical, but they were parts that also scared me. So as I said, I did have the auditory hallucinations, but I also had visual hallucinations at times. And so I actually would see faces coming out of the wall. And I also saw like I would see like auras like around people. I would see like a fuzziness to them that but there was like it was like a color too. I don't know. Like it's so difficult to explain this because it was so freaky. It was so kind of scary to me, but at the same time I was like, wow, like maybe there is something special about me.
Interesting. Yeah, one of the common things. I had a similar episode. My first episode, uh, the first thing that really, really changed was I could see these weird expanding waves coming out of people. And I didn't know what they were, so I thought at the time that I could see love. Like it reminded me a lot of what people described on mushrooms or acid. I could
Okay.
see love coming out of trees and people.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, oh yeah, I can do that now. And I didn't really know why. And of course, I stopped sleeping. I lost like a lot of
Right.
weight. I started like talking really fast, thinking really fast, thinking
Yeah.
that I could do whatever I wanted in the world. And like yourself, I went to a doctor in London and he gave me sertraline, an antidepressant. So that was a really bad idea. It
Yeah.
almost killed me.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, yeah, that's kind of interesting. And it's interesting that you also had it, I guess. It feels like there are some commonalities between our versions of bipolarity. Because, yeah, the auras were just really astonishing to just look at. It was almost hypnotic because it was so beautiful in a way.
Well, that's people, the colors that would be surrounding them. It was like, I mean, there's a part of me that misses seeing that. 'Cause it was really beautiful. And it felt kind of nice because I was like, oh, I can almost not read people's thoughts, but if I could read their aura enough, I could understand how they were feeling. And again, felt that I had a very special power to be able to do that. And there's a part of me that does kind of miss that because, I felt special, but I also did feel like I could tell how people were feeling because of it. And that was nice.
How long did
That
that
was
last?
bad. Um, the auras that only lasted like I only like a few days. Anytime I had like a major psychotic episode like that, I think that's the faces would come from the walls during that time, and everybody would be. I remember I remember having just it, I don't even know what I was having. Something was happening to me, and I remember my brother came into the room and he was blinding, the light coming from him
Even these
was
aura were so powerful, so
it
expanding
was it
that you
was
couldn't
so
even,
huge.
because he came into you and he was full of, was he happy? Was he in love? Or
He was I think he was worried, but he was worried about me. And I guess you could say that was a sense of love. It was like I could just see the worry surrounding him for me. And it was so bright and so blinding. And I was just, it was at that moment that I knew something was wrong because I was like, oh, my brother is here, but he shouldn't be like that, right? Like he shouldn't be shiny. Like he shouldn't be shining like that. I think that this is not correct. And then, I started seeing faces coming from the walls, and I was like, okay, yeah, this is definitely, there's something wrong here now. Because now I'm scared. Like I still didn't really fully know what was going on, but I knew I was scared. So that's the mysticalness. Uh, it's a good thing and it's a bad thing because, you know, I guess when I think of mystic, I think of magic, right? And there's good magic and there's bad magic. Or at least that's what they say in all the books and all the movies and stuff. So it's like some of it was good and some of it was bad. But I remember the good ones a little bit better.
for sure. Yeah, it just interested me because in my own experience with that, and then I started going more into meditation. I've been meditating for many years. And I
Okay.
started hearing reports of people who meditate a lot, who do similar things. They also see auras and chakras.
Yeah.
And when I looked at it in the drawings, I was like, this is what I saw. So I
Okay.
thought, that's really weird. And I actually asked my psychiatrist about it, and he just said, well, if you meditate at a certain point, you enter these states of ecstasy that might have similar brain chemistry to mania. If you look at monks, Buddhist monks, whatever, there was one uh, thing where I think they gave them MDMA to these Buddhist monks, and they came out and they said, "Yeah, it's kind of like when you meditate a lot." I was like, "Really?"
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So it does make sense. Like I've started to have a bit of that perception coming from meditation. So it's like I think if you want to connect, even though I've been told meditation can be dangerous. Like my therapist, she told me once, like it's auto hypnosis. You're hypnotizing yourself. I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Um, but yeah, I just became really interested because I went like, so wait, the Hindus, some yoga schools or whatever, they have written about these auras for 5,000 years or whatever. I don't know how old it is. Um, and we bipolar people, some people seem to have this too. And people who take psychedelic drugs, they also have this. There's actually a page on Wikipedia called Post Hallucinogenic the Hallucinations, something like that. And it says a lot of people take acid and mushrooms the day after they see auras. And when I read the description, I was like, this is exactly what I had. Which again also makes sense because these psychedelic drugs, they are kind of like psychotic episodes, but they go away for most people, right? Like if you grab someone on LSD, you put them in a mental hospital at the moment that they're high, people will go like, well, he's psychotic. He
Yeah.
sees things, he's hearing things, he thinks he's speaking to God. So they would commit him. So I wonder whether there's a similarity there that is interesting. Because, like you, I also felt like I could read people really quickly, or even before I knew them. Like, I was in the subway in London once, and I remember looking around at people in this state where I could see the auras. And I would go like, okay, that person's sad, this is depressed, bad day at work, his wife isn't talking to him. I just looked around and I could kind of tell how people were feeling in milliseconds, right? You didn't have to analyze the situation consciously. You kind of had a really good intuition, right? Is that kind of making sense?
Yes, it does,
Yeah.
because that's very similar to how it was for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but it's something I really want to find out how common this is. Because bipolar people also, at some point in certain cultures, were considered links, with the spiritual world and stuff like that. And I go like, is that why that was happening? Because we can see these auras and had some visions. I don't know. Go on.
Well,
Sorry.
I read something. Don't ask me where I read it. It might have been on Reddit or something. I don't know. I read it somewhere. Um, that back in the day, people who have bipolar or people who have schizophrenia, like they were prophets, like they were considered mystical. They were considered to have a spiritual link. And I always thought that was kind of cool. Um, I always thought it was cool. I mean, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, so I don't know the links between that, but I know that so many people who have bipolar have talked about that kind of thing, that there must be, there must be something. There's got to be something there that just, there's something that's got to connect us in some way, right?
I think it's possible. Yeah, I think it's plausible. We sort of debated how bipolar is often, if not virtually always, misunderstood by most people in our societies, at least. Um, if you could change one thing about how people perceive bipolarity, what do you think you would change? Like if you had a magic wand.
I had a magic wand and I could change anything that they see when it comes to that. God, I just wish that, I wish that they could see the person still, especially right as when you're told it, I wish that they understood that we don't change. I haven't changed. You haven't changed. I mean, we're still a person. We are still deserving of friendship, of love, of family, like we're still deserving of all of these things that people think that someone who has bipolar is not deserving of those things. Like they just because they see him as that's a crazy person, we should probably get them off the streets. Like that's not how you treat people to begin with. So why would you be treating somebody differently just because of something they have no control over? Or at least, let me rephrase that. It's something that they were born with and had no control over getting, but they definitely have control over it now. So, yeah, I would want to change that.